Alright, well this is the last video. I hope that this series has been satisfactory to you, and I really hope that you've learned a lot about developing a core workflow for sample-based music production. We've been through a lot of material, and some of this can seem pretty daunting at times. I know that when I first started out doing this stuff, it was pretty overwhelming, and I relied pretty heavily on information that I found on forums, and that I got from friends who had more experience with music software. So let's just make a list of what we've been through. We started by talking about how to get audio into Ableton Live from your turntable or other device. We took a look at the Preferences menu, which is very important for setting up both your MIDI and your audio devices. When you first open up Ableton Live, make sure that your sound card is interfacing correctly with the software, you have the right driver chosen, and that you have all of your inputs and outputs that you actually want to use from your sound card enabled in Ableton Live. And remember, that's as simple as opening up Preferences, taking a look at audio, and going to your input and output config buttons, where you'll have all of these enabled or disabled. After that, we took a look at the hardware rig preset. I'll drag that in so we can take a look at it again. Remember, it's just this audio from, and then you set up your inputs on your sound card so that you're getting an audio signal in. You can set up some gain adjustments in order to get a hot enough signal on your track. Also remember that this external instrument device is actually created on a MIDI track. So if you actually want to sample the audio that's coming out of your hardware track here, you want to make sure to send the audio to some sort of audio track in Ableton Live and then record it on that track. Once we got audio into Ableton Live, we looked at the basics of lining up warp markers and chopping out your loops using the crop sample command. Beyond that, we looked at how to actually slice up the audio, which is, again, arguably the most important thing for a sample-based production workflow. We saw that it was as simple as right-clicking and going to Slice to New MIDI Track, where we're presented with a simple dialog, where you can choose how you want the slices to be set up, including slicing to your custom-defined warp markers, which we looked at. And we also looked at choosing a slicing preset, including how to create your own. In addition to that, we took a look at the features of Simpler and drum racks, and specifically how those two devices interact with one another, so that when you slice audio, it creates a drum rack that's filled up with simplers on each pad. Perhaps the most powerful feature of the drum rack device that we looked at was the ability to map multiple parameters to one macro knob. We took that concept even further by defining our own custom macro knobs and then saving that as a preset. Philosophically speaking, the idea with the macro knobs is to assign all of the parameters that you feel are related for your specific goal onto one knob. Remember that each of the parameters that one macro knob is modifying can be modified using different scales, using those min and max settings in the drum rack view. If you remember, it's just right here in map mode, and then you can set up your min and max values. We also learned about choke groups and how they help to ensure that slices won't overlap one another's audio. Of course, the danger with the audio of each of the slices overlapping one another is that it will muddy up your mix and reduce the clarity of the individual slices, as well as the other instruments in your track. Additionally, we learned that drum racks do have their own sends and returns feature so that you can embed your own effect settings right here in the rack. And broadly speaking, the reason why all of this is so useful is that you can just fold up this drum rack and then send it to anybody else who you might be writing a track with, and you don't have to worry about having all of this stuff laid out in arrangement view or any of the audio clips. You can just have a drum rack with everything loaded up and ready to go. Also remember that drum racks are a great way to stack up sounds and create bigger and better sounds. Remember that we took a slice from both a melodic as well as a rhythmic sample, created a few copies of it, and then created a multi-pad out of it. And of course, a multi is when you have more than one chain assigned to a drum rack pad. Each multi is actually represented by its own drum rack that's nested within the main drum rack. Also keep in mind the few tips that we went over when we were talking about stacking samples. Specifically, you want to make sure to cut out all the unnecessary frequencies from each of your layers in order to keep a clean mix and avoid phasing problems. Now remember, specifically for the melodic stacking that we did, we took each of the slices and we retuned them against one another, so we created a chord. One of the biggest reasons why melodic slicing like that is useful is because you can process each slice in a slightly different way. For instance, assigning different envelope release settings to one slice versus the other. But also remember that if you want a parameter to be the same on all of the slices, all you have to do is right-click and go to Copy Value to Siblings. Now for the custom drum that we created by layering, remember that the most important parameters were really the filter settings for each of the layers, as well as the filter envelope settings. By using the filter envelope, we created a much stronger attack phase for part of the drum, which means it's hitting a lot harder in the track and it'll cut through the mix much better. It'll also sound a lot better over a big club system if that's what you're going for. Also remember that I took one of the layers and tuned it down quite a bit, down 6 semitones, and by doing that I modified the low end of our custom drum a lot from where it originally was. Last, we took a look at how to blend our layers even further by using a compressor after our multi. I brought the threshold way down and then played around with the attack and release settings until the compressor was basically drawing out the sustain and release phases of the drum. The most important part of this was that I increased the attack enough so that the compressor didn't squash that nice attack phase that we'd gone to so much trouble to create. The last thing we took a look at was resampling, where I simply set up a new audio track, got the audio from resampling, right here, and then recorded everything that was coming out of the master output in Ableton Live. Using that resampled audio clip, I then showed you how to set up your custom warp markers so that when you slice this audio track to MIDI, you told the drum rack instrument exactly what slices you wanted included in the drum rack itself. Now the last tip I want to leave you with before we end off the series is collect all and save. Normally, when you want to save your progress in any kind of software, music software included, you would just go to the save command. However, Ableton Live helpfully includes a more advanced version of save called collect all and save. You won't be able to see me access this because it's off the screen right now, but I'll go ahead and drag it into Frame here once I get it open. It's just under File, Collect All and Save. It brings up this dialog, asking you if you want to self-contain the current live set. If you hit OK, it will bring up another dialog asking you what exactly you want to save with the live set. The nice thing about this is that when you collect all and save a live set, the file itself includes all of the samples that you've created and all of the samples that you got from the library, everything. That way, when you give this live set to a friend, or if you open it up on another computer while you're on vacation, say, Ableton Live won't get confused on trying to find the samples on the new hard drive. In this way, you can make sure that all of the samples and audio that you used are right there inside of your live set, no matter where you access it. So that about does it for the series. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at sounddt@gmail.com. And I'm always open to answering all of your questions and clarifying anything that you might be confused with. Again, I know this is a lot of information to take in at first, and that's why I'm happy to answer questions to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I hope you have a lot of success using this core workflow in the future, and I'm sure that with very little time you'll be able to modify it and expand upon it to suit your individual needs.